It is time for another best of 5 series in StarCraft 2, and what I got for you today is an extremely high level Zerg versus Protoss between two professional Korean players. Spawning here in game number 1 on Sequencer LE, playing with the blue Protoss pieces, we have none other than Zest. And his opponent spawning in a cross position and playing in red, and of course in this series he will be playing with the Zerg. He goes by the nickname of Leenock. Now, of course, both of these guys have been around for years and years and years. I remember watching them probably back in like 2011 or so. They've been around for quite some time. And of course, both of them have won plenty of tournaments ever since. They are very, very good at what they do. And the nice thing is that, of course, we have a best of 5 series between two guys that will have most definitely played many, many games against each other in the past before. And that's awesome, because usually if we're going to see something a little bit funny, it's going to be in a best of 5 series. Because if you want to win, I mean, playing macro every single game is an option, but generally speaking, pretty uncommon. So we'll see exactly what they have in store for us here. We do immediately see that Nexus first going down after the pylon here for Zest. A very greedy, economy-focused opener. But here's the thing, right? In most game number 1s, I suppose, in the first game of a series, most of the time, players are gonna sort of like test the waters with a macro game. Now, of course, it is a perfect situation to go for a little bit of cheese as well, but I think it's a little bit more unorthodox. If we're gonna see cheese, usually it's gonna be from the player that is 1-0 ahead, or maybe even 2-0 ahead, because they have got a little bit of wiggle room, right? They've got a bit of room to mess around. Usually in the very first game in a series, we do see a nice little macro game, and we'll see whether or not that's gonna be the case for this one as well. Leenock going for that hatchery first into the extractor, and now also a spawning pool, and it does look like he's looking to take an extremely quick third base. I love this. So both of the players going for a very economy focused build, even though neither of them know what the opponent is doing. A little bit of greed right there. I most definitely do appreciate it. Now there's a double gateway setup going down right here at the front for Zest. Bit of an interesting pylon positioning right there. You'd say that that is a little bit vulnerable right there in case of like pylons, or in case of like banelings busting that pylon and all that. But regardless, I'm sure that Zest has got more experience with the Protoss pieces on this map than me, so he apparently feels like this is plenty safe for the time being. Cybernetic score also going down. There's double gas in the main base, so while Zest will indeed be chrono boosting out 2 probes at once, he's also going to be capable of following this up with either 2 adepts or 2 stalkers, which I assume is going to be the case right now. Probably adepts. There indeed, we do see them being created, and he's going to start up a little bit of harassment. Now Leenock gets to the other side of the map, recognizes of course the timing right here on these gateways finishing up, and he will know precisely what's going on because there's double chrono boost, right? He knows that that Nexus on the low ground is going to be finished already. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, while we do see a Stargate going down right here by Zest as well, and interestingly enough, he's actually sort of like bypassing these debris altogether already, which I quite like. This is going to be in fission range right here as well for the Overlord, by the way, so Leenock knows precisely what's going on. But meanwhile, on the other side of the map, we see a bunch of Zerglings going down. We see that very standard Baneling nest going up right around the 3-minute mark, and he's now also making a bunch of queens while squeezing out as many workers as he possibly can. Now, of course, really the Protoss' goal at this point in the game, right, is to just simply try and prevent the Zerg from getting a whole lot of economy, and all he really needs to do is just harass a little bit, force some units out of there. Make sure that this Protoss player or that this Zerg player is not gonna like infinitely make drones. And actually, we see a lot of Zerglings going down right now. I wonder if we're planning to see, or if Leenock is planning to go for maybe a bit of a bust here. I mean, the amount of Zerglings right there is going to be more than enough to, you know, potentially deal a little bit of damage to any kind of adepts that may be across the map here. But still, I'm starting to be a little bit worried, like, for this single pylon right here. I mean, there's a chance for a full wall-off at the front, but as it is right now, Zest does not know about any of these units, and while the pylon does go up there in the nick of time to prevent these Zerglings from going into that natural, and the photon overcharger will be triggered as well, that is the only one that is available, and I think that Zest is going to make the assumption that this is just going to be a little bit of pressure. There is going to be an Oracle available immediately right when it pops out. It activates that ability, but here we go. Leenock opening up extremely aggressive, trying to close this game out early, and I absolutely love this decision by him, making it tough for his opponent to assume what's going to be happening in the remainder of this series. And while the Protoss was planning to go for a standard macro game, going for that super quick third base already, I don't think that this is going to be an easy one to come back from, because with both of the pylons once again killed at the front, Warp Gate never finishes, and Leenock picks up a solid 1-0 lead in this series. Alright, so game number 2 is gonna be on Abyssal Reef LE. This is a bit more of a macro-focused map, and generally speaking, it's much easier to secure a third on as well. Now, truth be told, Zest, of course, did end up doing a little bit of scouting with the 2 adepts that he had in the earlier part of the game, but he did not quite recognize exactly what was going on. I mean, the Baling Nest right there was at a pretty normal timing. Usually you see it go down maybe about a half minute or so later, but I figured that it was a response to the double gateway opener right there from the Protoss player, just in case that, you know, Zest was gonna save up to maybe 4 to 6 or so adepts to try and make that push into the natural or the third base of the Zerg right when they all finished up. But right when Leenock managed to surround that, I mean, I don't know if he was planning to go for that push all along, but right when he managed to get the full surround on those first 2 adepts, he started dealing a lot of damage to his opponent, and of course he hit there right before the warp gate research was done as well. Plus, really all of like the tech structures from the Protoss player were all at the front. It's most definitely a bit of a risk, and while I guess the pylon was a vulnerability, it was just barely not done there. The warp gates, that is, in the nick of time. Anyway, we do have another map right now, and this map, like mentioned, is a little bit easier to secure a third base on. So you got that natural that's nicely tucked away with a bunch of rocks that you can destroy if you want a little bit more wiggle room, but this is not going to be something that is easily pushed into, and the same can be said right here for the third base. Now, there are a bunch of entrances to try and push your opponent in, but for the most part, this is a pretty easy base to defend, just because it's reasonably close to the natural. I mean, you can just simply create a wall right here at the top of that natural and position most of your units at the third. That way, you got to be able to hold on with relative ease if you are the Protoss player. And speaking of which, we do already see that Nexus go down right now by Zest here in game number 2. He's going for that cybernetics core after getting the gateway here at the front, so not playing nearly as greedy in this one. No Nexus first shenanigans, but of course, he had to test the waters here and there anyway. And Zest, of course, definitely a very high level player. He will just play it a tad bit safer, because being 2-0 behind in a series means that you would have to win 3 in a row, which is a very, very tough thing to try and achieve. So he will be able to get the double gas geysers right now, and I wouldn't actually be all too surprised if once again we will see a Stargate focused opener here from the Protoss player. I mean, he actually went for the full wall right here at the front, which I quite like, really not allowing the Zerg to get in there whatsoever. And on top of that, if he wants to secure a third, say a minute or so from now, that is actually going to be a viable option. And actually, yeah, there we go. Well, I thought for a second that the probe was already looking to take it, but no, he's just simply going to construct that Stargate, create that wall right here as well, which is a bit of a semi-wall. The Overlord will shortly confirm this, and Leenock knows precisely what's going on, but I wouldn't be all too surprised if we see a very quick third Nexus here from the Protoss player. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, the third base for the Zerg is just about to finish up as well. We see 2 queens in the production tab. So once again, very late queens here, comparatively speaking, right? Going for that third hatchery before he even gets the queens out, which is most definitely a little bit greedy, but I guess he confirmed anyway that his opponent went for a quick expand, so he should be in a decent position. Leenock now also trying to position an Overlord, or rather an Overlord right there at the third base. There's an Adept across the map now too, trying to pick up a kill or 2 on those larvae, but for the most part, I think this is going to be a scouting Adept, because the Protoss is not really going to be able to deal a whole lot of damage right here at this point in the game. And he's just simply going to try and shit on out of there, trying to make sure that he doesn't, you know, doesn't lose it at this point for nothing. And indeed, at the 3.5 minute mark, Zest does take that base. Now, that is a very greedy one, and actually we see a very similar build here in game number 2 from Leenock as we did in game number 1. I mean, he's just simply left the drones and gas with those late queens. He's just going to get the larva to go ahead and pressure, and I wonder if this is going to work 2 games in a row. Generally speaking, not something we see a whole lot at the higher level of play. There's going to be plenty of banelings though that can indeed be morphed in. There's now also this wall at the front, and Zest actually, he does decide to go for that Oracle, but he's also creating a Void Ray to really make this a whole lot safer in case of a bunch of roaches moving across the map. And actually Zest making the smart choice right there. He decides to turn him around upon seeing more and more reinforcing Zerglings. That third is going to be in a lot of trouble. Here we go though. The banelings will try and walk towards the natural instead. Photon overcharge does go down. Nice target firing. But however, there's already a second wall here ready to defend against this pressure here for the Protoss player. Pylon also does go up. This one will just barely be able to power that Stargate. And I think that indeed in game number 2, even though it's a very similar build thus far, Zest will be able to shut it down at the very least for the time being. And actually that pylon, ooh, I was a little worried for that. That pylon is just barely not going to be in range of that Stargate, so that Stargate will not be able to finish up that Void Ray just yet. And actually, even though the Zerg wasn't looking in that particularly great of a situation, he's making the best of it right now, just nibbling away with as much as he can, still producing non-stop Zerglings and making a lot of Banelings here as well. It's going to continue pressuring his opponent. Now, the Void Ray is indeed, you know, out right now. He's going to be able to start picking off a couple of these Baneling cocoons, which is very, very helpful. There's now, of course, still both an overcharge available as well. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen that one just yet here from the Protoss player, but I think he may be trying to trap the Zerglings here with a couple of force fields instead. And even though the Zerg is continuing this pressure, I highly doubt he will be able to finish up this third Nexus. And while he will be able to pick up a couple more Adept kills right there, I highly doubt that he's going to be able to really deal the damage that he was looking for. Leenock, however, I mean, he's finally adding on more drones once again, but he's still adding on 10 more Zerglings. Brilliant defense so far, by the way, by the Protoss player. Really, like, deciding to not go for that pressure there with this Oracle turned out to be absolutely crucial. Recognizing that his opponent once again was going for a very similar build as he did in game number 1, definitely did allow him for you know, a whole lot of kills there. I was getting a little worried because if that Oracle would not have had energy to defend at home as well, while the mineral line of the Zerg would have been very exposed, he may have very well lost the third base, and with that, really, like, most of this game. And speaking of which, well, this third is still going to be in a lot of pressure. A lot of these units will try and get some kills in. Nice force fields going on, or I should say decent force fields going down, making this at least doable right now for Zest to hold on for just a tad bit longer. But I don't think that the drones are, you know, the drones are an indication right now that Leenock is going to continue the aggression. He's just simply going to sit back and start up the macro, getting a very late +1 attack upgrade. And Zerg, of course, you know, he's been slowed down quite a bit. This is most definitely an advantage right now for Zest. Because, of course, while there are a couple more force fields going down right here, and Leenock is trying to make the best of the army that he's got, while, of course, Zerg always has to make the choice. And look at the amount of sentries. That's insane. So uncommon, but he just wants to be super safe here. While the Protoss, the Zerg always has to make the choice, right? If I want to make drones, or if he wants to go ahead and make a bunch of units, Protoss can always continue making probes while under pressure as well. And at this point, we most definitely see a nice economic lead here for the Protoss player, having that third base fully saturated here, as well as having a solid amount of tech already. Now, a lot of Stalkers are also being warped in, so it does look like Zest may be looking to go for a bit of counter-attack pressure, and I really do like this. There's going to be a response, however, with these Dropper Lords, right? The Overlord Cocoons are currently being morphed in. He's going to try and drop Banelings right on top of all of these sentries, and I think that that is going to be the best option that he has. At this point, there is absolutely no way for him to deal with the force fields, so he may as well try and go for the pressure right on top of all of these units. Now, of course, this is not going to be a surprise. Nice bit of micro so far, splitting up the different kinds of Protoss units here to try and do as little damage as he possibly can. More and more units also being warped in, and so far, brilliant defense here by the Protoss player against all of these Banelings that are trying to unload on all of his units. This is such a risk, though. The Adepts are a little bit clumped up together. One of the Overlords does end up leaving all of the Banelings on the ground, and a few units do get killed. Beautiful pickup micro right there in that Warp Prism, making the best of a bad situation. Continuing that warp in, that micro right there was brilliant. Loading up the weakened units, the ones that were under pressure right there of the Banelings. Target firing down the Overlords that were trying to drop the Banes as well. And while Leenock is desperately trying to hold on, man, that was a great game by Zest. Absolutely gorgeous play right there by the Protoss player. He does manage to even up the score in an extremely close game. That was gorgeous micro right there. That micro right there, I mean, I want to emphasize how difficult that is to do. You gotta try and be on top of not only the control of all of the units, right? Target firing down the Overlords, splitting up the units so the Banelings can't deal any damage, but to load up the, you know, the Protoss units into the Warp Prism right while the Banelings are dropping to prevent them from taking damage. That's a tough thing to do. That is a tough thing to do while also hitting all your force fields and just simply continuing onwards with the macro. Beautiful game number 2 here by Zest. I think that Zest must be asking himself whether or not Leenock is going to be a one-trick pony today. I mean, Leenock, of course, perfectly capable of playing a long, drawn-out macro game, but he's gone for the same build 2 games in a row. Now, game number 1, it worked out brilliantly. Game number 2, however, he just simply got outplayed right there by Zest. So I wonder what he's got in store for us right here in game number 3. And this time around, we're going to be on Ascension to IRLE. Now, Ascension to IR, definitely an interesting map. I mean, you've got two places right here to take your third base. Zerg players generally opt to take the one right here to the south, or, you know, the one that is leading away from the natural, whereas Protoss players usually take the one that is a bit easier to defend right here on the low ground. Although, we have seen a variety of players take the different bases instead. It kind of depends on the strategies that they want to be going for as well. Regardless though, Zest sending out a probe to try and go for that block off in the natural, but the hatchery is already down right here for Leenock. He's just simply confirming that nothing crazy is going on. So Leenock really used that 1-0 advantage that he had to try and obtain, you know, a cheap victory. I guess we can call that a cheap victory. And potentially, you know, bring his opponent to a 2-0 deficit, which of course makes it extremely difficult to obtain the victory in a series. Now Zest apparently returning 4 gas right there. Eventually, he does get another probe in there, but he's just simply creating 4 gas to try and get that Nexus out a tad bit quicker. I'm not entirely sure what the 4 gas had to do with anything right there. That seemed a bit random, but he's going to be able to get the Cybercore follow-up as well. And of course, he's fully scouting what his Zerg opponent is doing. Now, once again, we do see that hatch gas pool here for Leenock. It looks like once more, before taking the third, or rather, before taking the double queens, he's going to be capable of starting up that third base. I wonder if he's planning to once again, you know, continue onward with this Baneling aggression. I mean, in the last couple of games, he got the Baneling nest right around 3 minutes or so. We'll see if he's once again going to do exactly that, because so far, this setup looks identical. Now, of course, this may also just simply be to scare his opponent, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves the drones in the gas geyser right here. Okay, he does send them away. But sometimes you see players intentionally leave the drones in the gas geyser just to make their opponent think that they're going for a certain strategy. Whereas, you know, that of course will also trigger a response from the Protoss player. You don't necessarily need to, of course, use that gas right from the get-go, and it isn't necessarily an indication that we will see some pressure coming out of the Zerg here as well. Regardless though, I'll keep an eye out on the production tab to see what exactly is going on, because Zest, once again, he doesn't care about being scouted. He goes for that Stargate-based opener. So really no variety in Zest builds just yet. Just simply playing the exact same style every single time. And really the same can be said right here for Leenock too. While the Queen in the main actually got cancelled initially, I guess he didn't have the resources to start that one up a little bit earlier. He's once again going to be able to create a handful of Zerglings, and he will be making, you know, more and more drones as well. Now, this was the point previously where the Zerg player got that Baneling's nest up. Now, of course, there's going to be a scout into the main base with that adept shade, just like we have seen in game number 1. This time around, though, no Baneling nest just yet. I wouldn't be surprised if we still see it. I mean, once again, to throw your opponent off, it's actually a pretty solid option as well. But this time around, there's a lot of drones on the production tab, as well as more queens. So it does look like Leenock is planning to play something a little bit different. Still, wouldn't be surprised to see the Baneling nest, just in case of a depth pressure that will, you know, have a chance of coming out here in just a bit. Zest, however, not thrown off in the slightest. It simply goes ahead, makes that third Nexus once again off of literally a single Adept and a single Zealot. And while he is producing that Oracle, game number 2 did show us that if you create this little nuke right here, right? And I like this positioning a lot. Look at that. Right? If you make that little nuke, the Adept can do so much damage and the photon overcharges can be so efficient that apparently the Protoss does feel safe enough to start up that base with very, very minimal units indeed. Once again, though, we do see that Starport, or that Stargate rather, producing a Void Ray. Just trying to be safe here, not taking any additional risks. But I think that we are setting up for a bit more of a macro-focused game. Oracle heading inside of the main base right now of the Zerg player. He's going to try and pick up a drone or two, but the queens are already there to greet it, as well as that Spore Crawler. So Leenock perfectly responding to what the Protoss player has got in store here for the time being. Now, of course, he does know about this Nexus as well as that Mickey Mouse face right there. He's going to be capable of figuring out exactly what it is the Protoss is going for. And he actually does spot that there are 2 Void Rays out here in total already, or at the very least 1 out and then a second one in production. Something that has become a little more popular as of late. Even though technically speaking, the unit got nerfed, it has become a little bit more popular in early game openers over the last couple of months. In particular, when the Protoss player is looking to go up to that mass Skytoss based army. So the army based around, you know, the Golden Armada, where you indeed go up up 2 more Stargates, and then you go for the Fleet Beacon shortly after as well. And I wonder if that is what we're going to see out of Zest here as well, because I wouldn't be surprised if he plans on going for carriers. Now, of course, Leenock currently does not know about these additional Stargates just yet, so he will have to figure this out. The thing, of course, about maxed out Stargate armies is that usually they're extremely strong if they manage to get to that point. Keeping alive, however, or you know, making sure that your units are going to be alive for a long amount of time is going to be very helpful. And maybe Leenock already roughly knows that this is happening just by seeing the first 2 Void Rays going down. I mean, it's not a guaranteed, you know, push to come after that, but I guess he is sort of at the very least putting it on the list of builds that he still is assuming his build order or his opponent is going for right now, just because the build order that Protoss is doing there is a little bit more uncommon. Usually you see something based around the Immortal, and then of course also you know, the Archons, but at this point in time there's very little to be seen from that just yet. Now Zest actually making a lot of voids here, and I like this a lot. The general response from the Zerg players to either try and just simply overrun the 3rd base, but the thing is that they're still really solid against Hydralisk as well in smaller numbers, and in particular if the Zerg goes for that like 70 worker Hydra Queen push. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see something along those lines. I mean, at this point, 64 drones out here for the Zerg player. He's adding on that +1 attack here. It's just about to finish. There we go. He's also getting that upgrade right here, the speed as well as the ranged upgrade for the Hydralisk, and he's going to be capable of pushing quite nicely. He will confirm here shortly as well that there is no 4th base out just yet here for the Protoss player, and while Protoss doesn't have any carriers just yet, the revelation right there on all of those Hydras will say exactly, or will show exactly where all of these units are going to be located. I'm a little worried here for the Zerg, to be honest. This stasis ward cannot be spotted. There is no detection available at this point in the game. Is there even a single Overseer? There is not. He's creating more and more drones, so he must recognize that this is not going to work out just yet. And he is indeed now also teching up towards that infestation pit, either for a hive to go up to Vipers, or to just simply, you know, neural parasitic carriers once they do come out. Now, a whole bunch of cannons are going down, but I don't think he's going to be capable of doing a whole lot. I mean, stasis wards, cannons, photon overcharges, and then we of course have the sentries as well with their force fields, and then on top of that the tons of Void Rays in the air already. This is going to be a tricky one to defend against. Gateway's going down right now, and I actually quite like this here from the Protoss. This is something that I'm not all too familiar yet myself with. I mean, the thing is, usually people try and rush out to the carriers, right? But this seems to be sort of like a stepping stone. Now, a bit of an interesting supply block right there for about a good 20 seconds for Zest. Very uncharacteristic. I mean, I guess he may have been thrown off right there by his opponent's play, and he was forced to add on all of those cannons instead of pylons. But normally we do see people, and we do, by the way, see those infestors coming out. We'll see what he's got in store with us for us with that. But normally we do see people trekking up towards the carriers ASAP. But at this point, it looks like he's just simply trying to secure that 4th base, and he's sticking on Wow. Yeah, he's just simply sticking on the Void Rays, not going up to carriers at all. He's going for the High Templar. I think he may be just simply adding on the Zealots then, and then the Archons maybe, and potentially even Storm as well. This is going to be an interesting concept. Sort of like throwing his opponent off guard, and I love it. It's like a natural development, I guess, of the Zerg versus Protoss meta. Now at this point we do see the centrifugal hooks right now for the Zerg player going down, as well as that hive play. There are a bunch of infestors available now too, so that will indeed confirm what's going on. Protoss player immediately scouting out the timing of that hive, so he knows that he's not going to be under some pressure from Vipers just yet, but this does mean that Zerg is going to be capable of doing a huge push, as that is a very late hive comparatively speaking. Most of the Protoss army trying to defend that 4th base. There are a bunch of High Templar out, but Storm is only about halfway done, desperately trying to chrono boost that one out. He will need it if he plans on, you know, stopping the Zerg force from advancing onwards. But so far, just a handful of Protoss units are doing a good job of holding this Protoss player back. Void Rays now also moving forward. He's got to be very careful though. These infestors currently unscouted, so that does mean that the Protoss has absolutely no idea that this is going on. He can of course go for some damage there. The fungal growth goes down on all of the High Templar. That is a huge deal, and every single last one of them does end up getting killed. Void Rays now also fungal growth down. They're gonna be halted for just a little bit. Now that was the last fungal growth available. We do now also see some of these changelings here at the front to try and prevent this Protoss player from moving onwards. The same with the infested Terran. Storm, however, is now available. Apparently there were a couple of cheeky units still hiding in the corner, but with that fungal growth on all of those High Templar, all of a sudden the majority of this Protoss army is falling, and Leenock with a very cheeky switch towards Infestor, which aren't very common in this scenario at all, does end up obtaining the victory by just simply shutting down the scariest spellcaster in the entire game. And I think, yes, I think that we can all agree, High Templar, probably the best spellcaster in all of StarCraft 2. Well, there we have it, a potential match point right here for our blue Zerg player. Now, of course, he could potentially go for a bit of a cheap strategy once again and try and close this one out. The thing, however, is that we are on Proxima Station LE, and this map does indeed feature an in-base expansion. And this in-base expansion in particular is a very easy one to take in the earlier stages of the game, and truth be told, expanding towards the low ground right here through a third as well is not that tricky. So I wouldn't be surprised if Leenock is planning to just simply play a straight up macro game in this match right here. Now, of course, Zest does know that he's on the ropes. I wonder if he's planning anything cheeky. It's going to be a very difficult thing to pull off. But so far, in every single one of these games in this series, he's been going for the exact same build order, not deviating from his, like, Stargate-based play just yet. Every single time, with the exception of the Nexus first, right? We've been seeing a very similar setup anyway. But every single time, he's been going for that fast expansion into the gateway, into the warp gates, and then also the starport follow-up after starting up that mothership core. It's been a very similar setup every single time around, with the exception of, I guess, the Nexus first in game number 1. Regardless, though, I'd love to see a little bit of variety from him. He's been playing a little bit predictably, and I think that is fine for Leenock, right? I mean, Leenock is going to be pretty happy knowing if his opponent is once again doing the same build. He's just going to be able to almost start blind countering that, right? I mean, there's been a couple of adepts that move across the map, but other than that, Leenock was basically free to drone up, and that's what he really made use of in that previous match just now as well, where he was just simply making so many workers in the early game that he had enough, like, I think he had enough workers like 6 minutes into the game to just simply start making non-stop army instead. And while we did eventually see him transition towards a fourth as well, he was just simply, economically speaking, looking very, very strong. Regardless, though, we do have that hatch gas pool going down once again, and then a third before starting up the double queens. Very cool. I haven't seen a lot of people do that lately. I see a lot of players just simply going hatch gas pool, getting the Zergling speed out, getting the 2 queens out, getting 2 sets of Zerglings out, and then creating a third base. So even that would be considered rather early. But at this point, Leenock, playing it a little bit differently, may have developed his own style. And of course, everyone does have their own personal preference. Zest just now finished up that 7 at his core. That does mean that he starts up the warp gate research once more, and he goes for the adept here as well as the Nexus on the low ground. Nexus on the low ground, by the way, just about to finish up. So really nothing out of the ordinary just yet. Now, Leenock, did that get scouted? No, the third base does not get scouted here just yet from Zest, but I think judging by the timing on the queens, he should have a decent understanding of what roughly is going on. And we finally do see a deviation right here from the same old from Zest, and instead he goes for that Twilight Council. Now, a couple of different options that he's got. Of course, he can go Dark Templar. Of course, he can go for Archon drops. Of course, he can go for quick adept play. Of course, he could even go Blink Stalker and even charge lots, which I have been seeing quite a bit of on the ladder lately, ever since the charge upgrade got made a bunch cheaper. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be the Archon drop. I would say the Oracle play into the Archon drop with maybe a bit of Dark Templar harass are probably the 2 standards right now for Protoss players in the Zerg versus Protoss matchup, just because both of them allow to transition towards a quick third base. Now, Zest, speaking of which, does verify that there is a third base out right now for the Zerg player, trying to just simply dodge those units there, those Zerglings, for an extended period of time. Really nice target firing down on that one weakened Zergling to prevent that adept from getting surrounded. And indeed, with that Dark Shrine going down, I think we can say exactly what's going on here, as Zest is planning to go for a bit of Dark Templar harass into an Archon drop as well. And maybe he might even skip out the Archon harass altogether. There we go. 3 additional gateways going down, so that means he can warp in 4 units at once, and 4, you know, will obviously morph very nicely into a bunch of Archons as well. Now, Leenock going for that Overlord drop right here. This will get scouted instantly from the Protoss player. This is actually kind of cool, though, because Zest is going to need this pylon to go up if he wants to actually deal some damage. Now, it does get fully scouted, but he's not currently capable of getting any additional units out. Now, Leenock does fully know well, or fully realize right now exactly what it is his opponent is going for. So while these Zerglings may be able to pick up a worker or 2, which is nice, he got the scouting information off, which is primarily what he is looking for right now. Plus, on top of that, a ton of lost mining time as well. There we go. One cheeky little drone does, or probe rather, does go down, and the Stalker and the Adept are desperately trying to catch up here. But the Mothership Core, while a little bit later in this game, is out now, and I think that this will shortly be shut down as well. Not bad, though. Making the best of this situation. Look at that. A bunch more workers going down. 3 probes in total. Now, Zest, actually, I didn't actually realize that this was the real, like, first deviation of the build order. A slower mothership core that will allow him less energy on it, but he's still got that third Nexus down at a reasonably early timing. On top of that, War Prism now moving across the map. There are already Zerglings out here. +1 attack is now also being researched, and apparently we had a bit of a pause right there for just a split second. But now that the lair is done, of course, Leenock is going to be capable of getting not only more high-tier units, but more importantly, he's going to be capable of getting himself these overseers out to potentially pick off any of these units. And I wonder how much the Protoss is going to try and commit to this. I mean, usually you get a little bit of damage done and this might all be fine and dandy, but he's already only created 2 Dark Templar here for the time being. Now, Leenock actually sent once again 8 Zerglings across the map. Very cheeky little move there, hoping that his opponent is so busy microing on the other side of the map that this will not go scouted just yet. And actually, this is not bad for him at all. Mothership core not being on the move just yet, so I'm assuming here that Zest feels comfortable enough to make the defense right here with only the Stalker and the Adept that he's got right here, as well as that single Sentry. But both players just trying to slow each other down and do a little bit of damage, right? Testing the waters here primarily. A lot of these units, however, did run across the map just now. That doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot of defenses available anymore at home for the Zerg player, but a lot of these probes do end up taking a ton of damage here in the meantime at home. Force Field does not go down. Actually, Leenock assuming as well that his opponent was going to do exactly that, but he was too busy microing here on the other side of the map, starting to deal damage towards his opponent as well. Zerglings making their way into that in-base expansion as well as the main, and all of a sudden, 24 probes go down in just a matter of seconds. And sure, while Zest is doing a good job here, harassing on the other side of the map, I wonder if that is going to really be worth it, because while he's dealing a lot of damage, he's losing a ton more probes here in the process. Very interesting decision right there to not force build. I believe that he had the sentry selected as well, so I'm not sure what exactly went down there, because I assumed that Leenock was going to make the assumption there as well that he would not be allowed in that base. You could already see him like running up the ramp and then back down just because he knew that his opponent was perfectly capable of hitting those force fields. But apparently Zest felt comfortable at the time. He was not gonna be able to hit those force fields in time, and it ended up costing him dearly, because all of a sudden 27 workers end up getting killed, and that is a huge amount of workers to go down at the 7-minute mark, and Leenock most definitely obtaining that really solid early game lead. That Spore Crawler trying to do a bit of damage right there to the War Prism, actually doing a very good job at doing exactly that. Bunch of probes though do get killed there, which does even up the advantage just a tad bit, but already it's 43 workers in favor, or rather 58 workers right now in favor versus only, well, I guess at this point 46 from the Protoss player. Spire going down here for Leenock, interestingly enough, not opting to go for any kind of Hydra play just yet. Instead, sticking on that Roach-Ling Bane style here in the earlier part of the game, going for the upgrades to the melee units as well, and then switching towards the Spire. Very cool little play here. I guess this may be a response to the Archon drop as well. Once again, though, the units will be forced to run because these Archons, they deal a lot of damage in a short amount of time if you're not careful. And of course, they do regenerate their shields very, very rapidly, as that is pretty much all they have. Now, he's got to be careful here. These Spore Crawlers and Queens are starting to deal a lot of damage here to that War Prism. But of course, Zest a little bit too good. He's not just going to give up his War Prism with 2 Archons loaded into it for free. 6 Mutas do come out though, and of course this Spire was scouted just now as well by Zest, so he's just simply going to try to make his way on out of here, making sure that he's not going to be running, into those units as well. But at the same time, that does mean that a lot of Zerglings and Roaches are going to be able to roam the map for free, as map control is currently in favor here of the blue Zerg. More and more High Templar are also being morphed. I wonder if these are going to be Archons. I wouldn't be all too surprised if that is going to be the case. But Leenock just simply sitting back here, making another base here on the left-hand side as well, taking up towards that 4th base, and trying to just simply do a little bit of damage here, going for that Glio, or rather the centrifugal hooks, to try and do as much damage as possible. Woo! Man, War Prism survives with 1 HP in total, dropping off those Archons there in the nick of time. I don't know if you want to load those up. I don't know if you want to do... Oh my god, that's so... Man, That's insane. Why would you do that? That's so risky. I guess there's a potential value there. He's trying to get the bait off right now as well. And Archon's, of course, extremely good at dealing with these units. But still, 7 probes end up getting killed in just a matter of seconds. But so far, Zest doing a phenomenal job of holding onto his base there. And he's kind of going to need those little tricks. Archon just barely, once again, does get dropped there. War Prism lives for a little while longer. The other Archon here in that in-base natural, trying to make the most of this situation. And actually, 2 Archons are zoning these units for days, making sure that they do not get the damage done that they were so desperately trying to get done here with a 1 HP War Prism that finally starts regenerating some shields here again as well. There is Storm available, of course, right now for Zest. So Zest will be able to actually stop this here for the time being. He's going to be capable of morphing in more and more Archons as well as a bunch more Zealots. Currently, though, there's no fort base available just yet. And look at the amount of units out here for the Zerg player already. He's currently maxed out. Well, you know, 199 supply. There's a lot of Banelings in his army as well. They do have the Centrifugal Hooks upgrade, so they're going to be capable of rolling around. And at this point, while the Protoss is mostly looking, hey, is there already a Nexus down? He's going to be able to confirm that that is not the case, but it does mean that he's going to be under a lot of pressure here from a ton of Zerg units in just a couple of seconds. Because usually if the Nexus, or rather the Hive, is going to be late, that means that the Zerg is planned to go for a bit of a timing push. Now, I will try and force as many of these units as he can. One of the nice high-energy Templar, or the high energy, high Templar, I guess that's the better way to say it, does end up getting killed there. However, at the cost of a bunch of these mutas, so I'm not thinking that Zest is going to be all too disappointed in that. But look at this. This is going to be such a scary army to try and face off with. There's a bunch more Archon joining in this fight here in just a second. Beautiful storms go down. Great force fields as well, preventing the majority of those units from really closing the distance here. These Archons, however, they are soaking up a lot of the damage, but I wonder, was that going to be enough? There's still a bunch of storms here available. 70 Zerglings on the production tab, and Leenock, I mean, he secured that economy advantage earlier, right? He's trying to close this one out right here, right now. No Hive transition available just yet, but with some beautiful splits there by Zest, all of a sudden, the defense was spot on, and Zest has managed to secure, at the very least, his existence in this game here for a little while longer. That was some of the hardest defense to do, though, if you are a Protoss player. And the thing to keep in mind, of course, is that Zerg has been mining off of 4 bases here for a while, even securing the 5th base location right now, as well as the Hive and the Hydra Den. Now, Leenock, though, he tried closing out the game right there, tested the waters, found out that Zest indeed is a top-level Protoss player, so he wasn't just gonna die after a couple of hits, and he will be able to micro his way on out of there. And at this point, I mean, the mutas are still trying to roam the map. There's only a handful of them remaining. I guess they're trying to pick up whatever they can. I mean, a High Templar would be absolutely amazing, but I highly doubt that that is going to be the case, as indeed the mutas will be flocked towards the 4th base instead. Hive just about to finish up right now as well, but we see more and more upgrades here for Zest going down. I mean, it's got a solid amount of upgrades already, going up to the 2-2 here instead, which is going to be a big deal because that will make his unit significantly better, and that's really what Protoss is looking for. If they manage to get to a point where they are a 3-3 research, they're going to be very, very happy, because that all of a sudden means that if they max out on all of those Protoss units, they're gonna always have a very, great way at the back of their hand in case, everything goes south. They can still try and win the game just simply with the army that they've got. And Zest, I mean, it even does look like he's going for a move out right now, adding on a Stargate here as well. So I think that he may be planning to go for some higher tier units here, maybe in the form of Tempest or Archons or anything along those lines, or Carriers rather, or Tempest, anything along those lines to really prevent the Zerg from getting those greater Spire units out. If you still have to produce Tempest, while the Brutlers are already out, you're going to be in a world of hurt. But all things considered, this is looking not bad at all here for our red Protoss, making the best of the situation. And while more mutas were added on, I think that he's got plenty of defenses to at the very least ensure that they're not going to be able to deal a whole lot of damage. War Prism made its way into the main base here as well. He's going to dump off some minerals, making sure that at the very least is going to be capable of dealing a little bit of damage, going straight after that Greater Spire. And while the Zealots, I mean, they deal a lot of damage, is it going to be enough? The Greater Spire running so low, just barely make it do. Oof, man. That was such a close one, and the Greatest Spire just barely lives. At the same time, though, the majority of the Protoss army advancing on the creep now, which I don't know if I agree with that. There is no observer with his army out right now, and there's actually not a single observer on the map, so he definitely wants to be very, very careful there. But at this point, he's indeed confirmed that there is going to be a Greatest Spire for his opponent, and he's going to be capable of either doing a timing attack or transitioning towards those Tempests here very, very shortly. Now, the Archons are going to be able to deal with those mutas with relative ease. Huge storms going down. We're dealing with so much of that Zerg army there. Those Archons can take so many Baneling hits for days. Of course, they don't really hurt from the storms that much either. And all of a sudden, Zest has evened up the supply counts, and it looks like he's smelling blood. It looks like he may be trying to go for a huge push right now. Baneling's finishing up. Another storm does get landed on all of those units. The Immortals can take those hits for days. 5th base is under pressure, and Zest has all of a sudden managed to turn this one around. At the very least, that is what it looks like right now. Leenock sticking on that low composition army, that low tier army for an extended period of time, and it does work against weaker Protoss players, but Zest with some impeccable micro all of a sudden squeezes out a lead, and he does indeed even up the score, and that means that we're going to game number 5. Well, there we have it, the 5th and final game in this series. I'm not gonna lie, the 2 games that the Protoss player here ended up winning have been absolutely amazing. I mean, Leenock, he had a great chance of winning that last game, right? He had a great chance with that on winning this series as well, but he just simply, he made the Greatest Spire, but he never really transitioned into the Spire units just yet. He knew his opponent had it scouted, so he was a little worried that Tempests were gonna be capable of coming out already, and maybe Void Rays and all that, and he just simply stuck on that, you know, Baneling based army. But I guess he forgot for a second there that he was playing against one of the top level Protoss players in the world. Zest just simply had the army to deal with it. It is extremely difficult to micro if you are the Protoss player right there, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that joke around and call Protoss the A-move army. Well, try and control that composition right there with so many spellcasters and so many flimsy units. It's extremely difficult, but Zest did it brilliantly, and he ended up obtaining a very nice lead there, and eventually the victory as well. So I wonder if Leenock is going to be a little bit upset there. I mean, he tried playing a bunch of macro games. The macro games that he had played, I mean, one of course ended up giving him a fungal on the High Templar, so that was a little bit lucky. But in the, you know, the biggest macro game here so far, in game number 4, he just simply was not capable of obtaining the victory, and I wonder if that's going to throw him off just a little bit. Now, Leenock, it does look like he is going to be forced onto that 3rd base here as his first expansion. Now, if the previous games were any indication whatsoever, he will probably be taking this head tree on the low ground here very shortly as well. But this is going to make the macro just a tad bit harder here for the Zerg player. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, we do see that Nexus going down for Zest. He's going to be capable of controlling this area quite nicely with a wall. And of course, there's also this cooling tower that is destructible to complete the wall off here and make this even more difficult to get into. Now, of course, we are on Defender's Landing, right? And Defender's Landing is a very small map. This is a map that allows you to, you know, macro out a bunch of bases, but usually players don't really go over, say, like 4 bases at the very max. And usually the games actually end quite a bit earlier, just because this is such a rush-heavy map. Now, Zest, so far, not really showing all that much variety in his build orders just yet. The same can be said, though, for Leenock, doing, you know, essentially the same thing almost every single game, with the exception, of course, of, you know, sometimes him committing to a lot of Zerglings and Banelings. But other than the build order, I mean, it's been mostly a very similar, like, mid-game kind of approach with an early game focus on either aggression or a lot of drones. We'll see whether or not Zest is looking to switch it up, because so far that super early scout sort of does indicate to me that he is planning on just simply playing the same old strategy that he has practiced for literally thousands and thousands of games. Now, I say that, and all of a sudden we see a robotics facility going down first. Very interesting right there. There's no Twilight Council, so this is not going to be for War Prism. This may actually be a good old, like, this could just potentially be like a good old 2-base all-in. This is something that you don't usually see anymore at the highest level of play, because Zerg players have gotten so very good at countering in it. The thing is, of course, that if you fake a 3rd base from going up, right, which I've seen a couple of players do, they basically make their 3rd base, but they never really actually finish it. They just simply cancel it in the nick of time after the Zerg player scouts it. They're going to try and force a response out of the Zerg player, but this could just simply be a good old, I mean, this is a super old build though, but it could just, oh, that hurts. That hurts so much. Oh, that sentry. Anyway, this could just simply be a good old Immortal sentry all-in. Now, I wonder if that's going to be the case. Let's see what this robotics facility will produce. As it is right now, there's no... Yeah, there we go. We do see that Immortal going down. There's no gateways available just yet. Leenock at this point, of course, knows fully well that this is going to be robotics, but that force field was just like, you know, 2 pixels off. If that force field would have been 2 pixels towards the right, it would have instead made it significantly better right there for the Protoss player. But cutting it a little bit close right there with a sentry for defense until the Zealot was done. Leenock scouting out precisely what's going on. It looks like he's figured out the response as well. Going for the Overlord speed as well as the Evolution Chamber. So that means that he is planning on dropping Zerglings inside of his opponent's main base. Now this Overlord is already in production. Zest, of course, will be able to figure this out shortly as well. There's already a pylon right there, just barely on the perimeter, but I don't think he's seen that Overlord just yet. That does mean that he's going to be in a little bit of trouble. There's now also a robotic facility going down, and it looks like a 3rd Nexus as well. Now this 3rd Nexus could be a fake. I highly doubt it, considering there's now also a forge going down, which will be the indication that there's going to be, you know, at least a plan to get some upgrades as well as potential cannons. But I don't know, this is a bit of a funny build here from the Protoss player that I guess means that he's trying to stay safe here, loading up all of those units, and I guess he will be looking here to try and deal some damage to his opponent's mineral line with force fields as well as some other units. But here's the thing, there's already a whole bunch of Zerglings right in the middle of this Overlord. He's actually pretending like these are Banelings. He's actually trying to make this look like it's Banelings, and right now Leenock realizes it, or rather Zest realizes it, that is not going to be the case, and he just simply runs all of the units underneath the Overlord once again. But the posturing, I love it. It's such a cheeky little move, and I guess that the Zerglings will eventually be able to unload, but they will get picked up as well. Although Leenock, with some cute little micro there, keeps every single last of these Zerglings alive so far for the time being. Look at that. Such a cute little bit of micro, not something you usually see coming out of a Zerg player. Usually it's the Terrans and the Protoss that do that, but Leenock showcasing that he's perfectly capable of doing that too, although the Overlord does look like it eventually will end up going down. Meanwhile though, War Prism in the main base, I mean, this one will not achieve a single thing. Look at the amount of Zerglings here already ready to greet it. The Queens will now also say hi by flinging a couple of their spines at it, and I think that, all things considered, we're setting up for a bit of a macro game. Although, hold that thought, because even though Leenock did just defend against that pressure very nicely, he's still producing more and more units. He's getting, you know, a bunch of roaches out right now as well. 14 of them in total. That is a huge amount of stuff. And I think that while this pressure here is going on at the Zerg's 3rd base, or I guess that would be his 1st base, rather, or his natural expansion, really, there's a lot of Zerglings right now at the 3rd as well. And this starts to look like it's slipping out of control here for the Protoss player. I mean, that Immortal is caught in a very, very weird angle. It will end up going down as well. The Zerglings will be able to slip inside of the main of the Protoss player, and all of a sudden, with all of these roaches now also moving across the map, as well as so many Zerg reinforcements, this is starting to look like a very tough game here for the Protoss player to play. I mean, he's been showing some miraculous defenses in this series so far, but this one just feels a little bit sloppy. Look at that Immortal. What's going on here? He's all of a sudden losing focus, losing a bunch of these units as well, although he will be able to micro this back here for the time being. So many of these probes already end up getting killed, 18 of them in total, and that's a huge amount. There we go though, nice pickup micro once again. Zest showing what he is capable of, playing a little bit sloppy here previously, but of course those force fields, while they will keep the Zerg out here for a time being, that means that the 3rd Nexus will most definitely end up going down, and with that, Zest knows he's gonna have to GG out of it, and Leenock obtains the victory in a 3-2 fashion in a best of 5 series. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. And other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you in the next one.